The only reason you want to be doing all this in the state of New Jersey. See, guilt is something we all grow up with, okay? We have our moments. And so, temptation also, since we have guilt, we realize we also have temptations in our life. Temptation is something that comes to us, and the key dynamic of temptation is to, actually, if we think about it, is to get our consent. If we are tempted, it is to get our spiritual consent to doing something wrong. It is to have our will come in line to consent to do something. People say, well, the devil made me do it. And I said, what, possession? Is that what we're talking about? An exorcism? No, the devil didn't make you do it. The devil talked to you in a word, and you consented to go along. You gave your will over to it. You wanted to go on this journey. You made your choice. Temptation, the very nature of it, is to recruit us to do something that we know is wrong, hurtful, and not beneficial. That we would do it willingly. That we would give our will to it. Temptation never makes us do it. It just says, come on, join this side. Come along with it. The nature of temptation is to get us to be soldiers on the other side and walk the other way. In the story of the very first sin of Adam and Eve that we heard in our Genesis passage, you have to realize, as it's depicted here in the Garden of Eden, they had the whole world. Everything in the garden was theirs. Everything in the garden was theirs. They could eat of anything out there, except one tree, as the story goes. Well, this is just wisdom from the ancient times. Because give somebody everything and take one thing away, what's the only thing you think about? The one thing you can't have. The one thing. You don't think about that you have the world, that you have everything out there, that you have love, that you have a family, that you have all this other stuff. All you can think about is the one thing that cannot be yours, and what you have to do, and who you have to hurt, whatever it takes to get it. It's just wisdom. Tell somebody they can't have something. Whoa. There's a thing that gets up in our backs, and makes us move. And who can help us get over to the other side? Give ourselves to it. Give ourselves over to what can hurt us even. And hurt all those around us in order to acquire what we want. Well, the only one that can really overwhelm our wills is us. I'm sorry, you could try to get me to do something wrong. You could. You could really try to get me to do something wrong. You could really work at me on it. Okay? But the truth is, you're never going to be as good at getting me to do things wrong as I am myself. Because I know my weaknesses. I know the arguments that get me to come over. You can't possibly get me. And if I know you're trying to get me to do something wrong, and you try to persuade me, you know what? Just for spite, I ain't going to do it. Because I don't like people telling me what to do. But I can persuade me in a minute. I'm not supposed to have potato chips. They're covered with salt, my doctor says. High blood pressure, all sorts of damage, other stuff like that. Don't take those high salt foods. And if you came up and said, Jim, here's the potato chips, I would just go, no. Come on, Jim, I want to see you eat them. No. I'm going to make you eat them. No, you won't. But I could walk by with no one around there, and I can just go, well, I haven't had any salt in weeks. I've been good. I've been good. I deserve this. I work hard. I deserve this. See, I know how to do the tempting. So any temptation to get me to join the party is of my own will. No one could ever make me do something. The more I know they try to make me do something, the less it's going to work. But I can persuade me to do just about anything. Bad things. I've done it plenty in my life. that hurt me and others badly. I could persuade myself into anything. No. Temptation. There is an evil one. Because all I need to do is get Jim on my side. He's the best one to lead himself down this road and where he's going to go. The scriptures talk about how Jesus dealt with such a temptation. And gives us a focus on how to fight temptation. The first thing is to ask God not to lead us into temptation. To keep us focused always on what we really should be doing. That's the best way to go. When you're focused on what is good and what you're trying to get done, you don't even get tempted. But the request, please, Lord, do not lead us into temptation. Why do we ask? Because, well, we know the Spirit took Jesus to be tempted and led him into this, to a time of testing for him to grow. And what he had done through that whole period of preparation for the time of testing was to simply focus on God. He was in the desert. He fasted. He was drinking and stuff, but he was fasting, and there he was. He comes to the moment. Now, actually, for all intents and purposes, since he had so prepared himself spiritually by just staying in God's focus and staying with God and keeping his mind on God, I really feel sorry for Satan in this story. Aren't you one of the ones who feel sorry for him? Aren't you sorry for Satan? This was the most lopsided test in history. Jesus by himself hasn't eaten anything for 40 days. That's usually what they consider the outside end of a fast. It's 40 days. That's the outside end of any religious type fast. You would stop at 40 days. So he's come to the edge. But without anyone around him, no one to see if he was cheating, nothing, he has not eaten for 40 days of his own will. And then Satan comes up and goes, want a piece of bread? How about some bread? Oh, come on. He's turned down bread by himself for 40 days. You think that's going to stumble him? He has gotten so used to turning that down, that wasn't even fair. He goes, nope. I'll live on the Word of God, which is what he would have been living on. That was easy. Then he turns around and he says, I'm going to put you on top of the temple. And you're going to jump off. And since you're God's chosen, and just like we sang, he's going to, with his hands, hold you up. You're just going to come floating down, and everybody in the temple is going to think you're the greatest ever. Fame. People loving you, knowing you're the spiritual leader. Where has he been for 40 days looking for fame? He went to the desert. His spiritual battle, he didn't want anyone to see. It was personal, a spiritual battle. He went off to the desert. He wasn't looking for fame. What an idiot Satan was. Don't you want fame? Don't you want everybody to notice? No, I just went into the desert. I'm sorry, I'm not into that. And he just swats him away. It's really not fair. Satan was incredibly stupid. And the last thing that Satan offers him, I'll give you the world. I'll give you everything in the world. Just worship me. Jesus went into the desert to be with God, his Father, who he loved more than anything in the world. To be with his Father, who he loved most, who he knew loved him. He was God's Son. He adores his Father. And he's saying, turn from your Father and be with me. What can I give you to turn away from the one you love to be with me? What can I give you? Kingdom? To turn from your mother, your father, your wife? What can I give you to just turn from? Oh, that's stupid. He got beat so bad it was over in a moment. Jesus shows the way is by focusing on the love that God had given him. Turning to God and relying on God's grace and word and everything else. It wasn't Jesus just saying, no, no, no. He just stayed focused on God. We don't overcome temptation by saying no. What we do, for some of us, that's where it begins. We've got to say no to turn to what is wonderful. But once he turned to something wonderful, Jesus didn't have to say no anymore. He said, I'm just going to keep my focus here on God's Word.